Hi guys, my name's Seb Tudor, I'm the man on the Silver Mountain, and welcome back. Now today, we've got our month in review, and what a month. Like, I feel like the only things that I can talk about are just damage being done, and it's getting to the point of just being taxing and depressing. Um, but let's start off with the potential short-term damage, where something will end up going off with a bang, and then that'll be not necessarily the end of it, but that'll be the damage done. And so let's talk about North Korea's missile launch, whereby they launched a new ballistic missile that they've got called the Hwasong 15, and yeah, it's a more advanced version of some of the intercontinental ballistic missiles that they were launching in July that kind of had people worried in certain areas like Guam and Japan and kind of possibly kind of the edge of the United States. But for the most part, people were a little worried about that. But it didn't seem like anything that was particularly substantial compared to what North Korea had before. Unfortunately, now with this new Hwasong 15 missile, it's being said from the images from the test, from where it landed, from the trajectory that it followed, and so on and so forth, that this could potentially hit almost anywhere on Earth. It's going to have a much, much higher range, and it's going to potentially be quite risky for North Korea, especially with their current leadership, to kind of have access to, which is just it's troubling. Um, and so they've been talking about them being North Korea rather has been talking about them being able to carry nuclear warheads and things like that, which again isn't necessarily a substantial stretch, and yet they've not really proved that they've been able to miniaturize a nuclear warhead to the extent that it would be easy to fit it to the missile itself, so that it wouldn't cause unnecessary weight or drag or other problems that could potentially end up with much worse happening. But for the most part, at the very least, it looks like it's most of the northern hemisphere that can be hit by this new missile from North Korea's position. And again, it's the places that are probably on the safer side are purely South America. Everywhere else is within this missile's range, apparently. And you've got even China, who has been kind of almost kind of sat there being kind of pally, but also trying to remain neutral in regards to as many things as they can, being gravely concerned at this test. And then you've got all of the other people who are much more concerned. When you've got someone like Trump sat across the pond from North Korea, and there's a lot of bravado and threats, be they veiled or otherwise, going back and forth, and you've got Trump issuing the statement of "We will take care of it. It is a situation that we will handle." That could be taken as a threat. That could be taken as a nothing, which is pretty much what it is. Or it could be taken as just like not knowing what to do now, which again probably also rolls into the same thing. And you've got a lot of kind of tumultuous activity and worry and so on and so forth. But you do at least have a couple of people who are still sat there. For instance, Rex Tillerson, the US Secretary of State, who condemns the launch but goes, diplomatic options remain viable and open for now, and so we want to find a way to find a path to peace through denuclearization and ending these belligerent actions by North Korea. But here's the problem: it's all very well and good saying that they want to find a peaceful path to denuclearization and so on and so forth and blah blah blah, but when it's easy for them to say that as one of the nations that, without very many limitations, is able to hold a huge arsenal of various weapons, um, all unto themselves anyway. So those words do kind of, whilst I agree, hopefully diplomatic paths and options will remain open, and this won't turn out to be the beginning of World War III, where people just start launching missiles at each other. Because let's face it, the people who suffer from that the most aren't going to be the leaderships of these countries. They're not going to be the people in charge. They're not going to be Trump. They're not going to be Kim Jong-un. They're going to be all the people that just happen to be wherever those missiles land. They're going to be you. They're going to be me. They're going to be random farmers out in the middle of nowhere, people who are already suffering in North Korea, people who have done absolutely nothing wrong in rural areas of the States or in cities in the United States, or within their allied nations. It's not going to do anybody any favors. The people who are going to suffer are going to be the normal people. So I sincerely hope diplomatic options remain open and functional and work. And so that's where I'd like to see that go. And we did have a kind of interesting comment from state media in North Korea, where they said that the missiles would not pose any threat to any country or region as long as the interests of North Korea weren't infringed upon, and that was apparently their solemn declaration. But we've seen how temperamental Kim Jong-un can be before, and how easily riled and goaded he can be. So when you've got someone who slings as much crap as Trump sat across from him, we'll have to see how long that solemn declaration lasts. But it's a bit of a concern, just because of how many people could potentially die if this suddenly blew up, suddenly flipped out, and people didn't do anything. But also interests being infringed upon. Fine, okay, but what does that mean? Does that mean that any nation that has raised sanctions against North Korea for its human rights violations, or any nation that has refused trade, any nation that has convinced other nations to limit their trade, what it's again a very open, nebulous kind of statement here that we'll have to see what happens as we go forward. Hopefully it will end up being limited in whatever this turns out to be in the long run. But it's important to be aware of it wherever we are, considering that now this unstable and temperamental and at times incredibly aggressive power, albeit a minor power compared to some countries, but as they are continuing to develop, continuing to work and push things forward, they may very well not be a small power for long, considering they could very well kind of suddenly explode and bring other explosions with it that cause untold harm. So we'll have to see how that kind of pans out over the next few months and things, I guess. But there's that. And so now I want to go on and talk about the current situation of Brexit, because we are near the end of the year. We have dealt with this for so long, and we have seen so much happen. Most of it just grinding against a brick wall, and it's to quote Nick McPherson, who was a former head of the UK Treasury, who put this up on Twitter. These aren't negotiations, it is a drive-by shooting. And I feel like that is just a great way of putting it, because it's in a way anyway, because it's not Theresa May, David Davis, whoever wandering into this and sitting at a table as equals and tackling it. It's the belligerent children of one group being almost kind of wiped clean by a more powerful group that they knew was more powerful, that they knew they shouldn't have messed with, and yet it's turned into this situation where there's not even a chance for surrender due to just due to the ignorance and arrogance of our government. We are just going through concession after concession after defeat on this, because we've got the Brexit bill, which we'll get onto in a little more detail in a minute, and we've got all of these other things on being removed from Europol and the EU Defence Council and things like that, and being removed from other institutions and having to give in again and again and again to various Brussels mandated paths. And I'm still sat here going, we can stop this at any time, it's still on the table, we can literally just go, this is bollocks, it's not working. The quarter of the populace that went, yeah, this is a great idea because it saves our hurt feelings, they're all sat there going, we just need to be out, and yet we're losing money, we're losing time, we're losing patience in a lot of instances, and it's just becoming ridiculous. They want to move forward and strike a trade deal, they want to do this, they want to do that, but they're not getting anywhere because they're not actually, we're not in any kind of position of power, we're not in any kind of position of authority on this, we're just having to deal with it. And so then we're looking at the money, because that's what it comes down to, right? The money, we need that to survive, we need that to live, we need that to function, and we're not really paying attention to that particularly well at the moment, I don't feel. If you look back at who actually, because that was a big issue about, oh, we pay so much and we get so little back and blah blah blah, and all these lies that were being told about the money side of things that people were taking on board just as part of whatever they wanted to believe in, they just kind of took it on board with. But then if you actually look at the proper numbers that are being put forward, you've got the contributions of different nations all adding up. Yeah. So which nation actually puts in the most and gets back the least? Well, that would be the Netherlands, followed by Sweden, followed by Germany, followed by Denmark, followed by Finland, followed by Austria, followed by France, and then the UK comes in. Third from the bottom in regards to the nations that actually put money, a certain amount of money in, and more money in than they actually get back. And yet we still receive back half of what we get otherwise, and we don't send the money to Brussels and then they drip feed it back to us. That rebate, that kind of discount, as it were, is applied before we give any money to anybody. It just has to be funneled into the right places, which again are things like farmers and poor areas that have this money pushed towards them. And so, let's take a look at how much we are looking to lose and how much we've lost already. So, according to, where are they? Yep, the Centre of Economic Policy Research, we've already been losing around £300 a week, about 20 billion since the Brexit vote to, when was this put forward? To about 2 days ago from when I'm recording this, which is the 1st of December. And so, we've lost a substantial amount of money already, according to this. And yet, if you divide how much we were actually paying in by the number of people in the UK, per household, it was £125 per year. You're going to be paying more for online subscriptions, for various other services, for all manner of other things. You're going to be paying more than this. And yet, in regards to how much just the Brexit bill by itself, not in regards to lost trade, not in regards to our shrinking economy, loss of growth, higher inflation, all of those things that we are going to have to deal with in regards to losing out on this money. The Brexit bill just by itself is just under £1,000 per person, where it's been quoted as being anywhere between 40 billion rather and 60 billion. Divide that amongst the 64 million people in the UK, and you're getting about 940 odd pounds per person, or euros per person, whatever it's coming to. And so as a result, we're losing so much more. We're losing nearly 10 times as much in just the Brexit divorce bill by itself, which are all outstanding costs that we owe to the EU. It's not them demanding things from us that are unreasonable. It's we have taken advantage of services, we have taken advantage of resources, we have taken advantage of facilities that have all been granted to us as a result of us being a member state, of us paying part towards them, of us dealing with them, and so on and so forth. But as a result, we're going to have to pay our way out of those things based on how much we've used them. And so, though that 40 to 60 billion that is being asked of us is rather unsurprisingly just what is due. It's our what we need to pay back in terms of resources and facilities and things like that we've used. There's not two ways about it. If you as an individual had been providing a service to a person and then they said, oh no, I don't need it anymore, but you had still done an additional 2 months of work and they hadn't paid you for that yet, then you would want them to pay you as a result of them ending the contract and of terminating the agreement. Yeah. And if you didn't, then as an individual, you'd take them to court. You'd take them to small claims court. You'd put a CCJ out on them or whatever else. You would take them into that environment to deal with it. So guess what? That's what we're having to do. We're having to pay up, because otherwise we are, whether they would take us to an international court and deal with it that way, or whether they would then just go, well, we can't progress until this is agreed, until you actually realise that this is what you owe us or not, because they're holding all the cards. We can't tackle the largest trading bloc on earth by ourselves as a tiny nation, a tiny island that has delusions of grandeur and has done for decades now. We can't do that in and of ourselves. And so again, the fact that it has been said time and time again that we can always stop this at any time, we can always turn away from this at any time, we can always just completely ignore this, revoke Article 50 and just deal with this moving forward, taking a bigger step forward in realisation and in working with our European neighbours to actually make a better success of things. That would probably be where I would be sat in terms of going, yeah, let's do this. But that's the money side of things in terms of how much we're losing per household, whereby we're already losing, apparently, according to these guys that did this research and did these estimates I'm working through from the Centre of Economic Policy Research. They're sat there going, well, we're already losing nearly 3 times as much as it was costing per household for just to stay there. And so with that in mind, we should probably take a look and have a think about some of the other bits and pieces, right? So if we're already losing £300 a week, or £300 a week per household, then that's a lot of money, isn't it? That's where we're kind of stuck. And so then looking at things like the promises that were made, even in regards to the 350 million a week that we were apparently sending to the EU, and that would be made available for things like the NHS, which by the way is failing also under lack of money, lack of staffing as people are fleeing the country, which again we'll talk about immigration in a second, and in regards to the terrible handling of it by Tory individuals, Tory ministers who are throwing things out that just quite frankly make no sense. And so taking a look at that 350 million, that would no doubt make a huge difference to those people who are suffering, who are in need of healthcare, who are in need of better facilities, newer medications, all of those kind of things. Oh yeah, no, that figure doesn't include the rebate, which is the rebate that is put in before we send any money anywhere, where we get about half of that back. In which case, it drops down quite substantially, to being 200 million a week overall that we tend to be actually sending in their direction. And then that doesn't also include things that we still gain access to in regards to facilities, in regards to kind of other resources and things that are EU-wide, that have been kind of used by a substantial number of people. Maybe not in the foreground and things like that, but in regards to some of the stuff in the background, in terms of development, in terms of trade, in terms of growth, in terms of securing things for the people. So in terms of the money that we get back, we mainly get that money back through payments from the EU to things like farmers and poorer areas, such as areas of Wales and Cornwall. And as a result, we're potentially spending, I believe in 2016 it was 8.6 billion, and yet we got back 4.5. So we still got back half of that, quite happily. What we're contributing, we're still getting that good 50% or so back to function with. And so compare that to places like the Netherlands, that, as said, is contributing an awful lot, and I believe they're only getting like a tenth or so back. I'll have to double check that. But it's like they're contributing a vast amount and getting very little back, and so it's we're not by any means the worst off, and we're the ones that were benefiting from it quite substantially in regards to growth, in regards to having workers and people available. And so now let's take a look at the immigration side of things, because this is pretty damning in and of itself, where we've got a huge decline in immigration into the UK, where we're in previous years we had a substantial number of kind of members, individuals from EU member states moving into the UK to work and to for education, for whatever else, now we're seeing that decline, as there just doesn't, there's no place for these people anymore in regards to the public attitude. That's the way that they are feeling. There is a rise in various areas where they're being there's pressure being put on these people, and then further on top of that, you've got the still very wishy-washy definitions around whether or not those people will continue to have the same rights as everyone else, even after the split from the EU and after everything breaks down. There's no certainty, and that certainty is causing fear. It's causing a shrinkage in our economy anyway, in regards to trade and in regards to other things. But now we're also seeing it in regards to the people, as they are literally leaving the country. And so we're looking at net migration from the EU between 2016 and 2017 falling by 80,000 people. We're seeing the immigration of EU citizens to the UK falling by 50,000 people. We're seeing these significant drops in numbers, and then we're seeing a rise of EU citizens moving home from the UK, up to 123,000 people, compared to in 2016 95,000 people. So we're seeing a substantial change and shift in numbers where people are just leaving. And what could this mean for our economy? Well, nothing good, because for the most part, having more people and having more people to divide the GDP amongst, GDP being gross domestic profit, the amount of money that we accrue generally as a people before deductions of various sorts. We're seeing that with that, if you've got a larger population and you've got that wealth, that GDP spread amongst more people, and all of them have this potential to earn to increase that number, then it's probably going to be larger. And it's argued by an awfully large number of people, that's the case. The GDP per capita has increased thanks to immigration, thanks to there being more people around, thanks to there being more people to spread work around, and so increasing the nation's rate of productivity and growth. And so the lower rates of immigration, the lower numbers of people, are likely to work in the opposite direction and lead to not just a shrinkage, but just a generally more smaller economy when it plateaus again and after things aren't going up and down as much. Which includes research by a couple of individuals called Jonathan Ports and Giuseppe Forti, released in January of this year, that suggests that lower net migration from the EU over the coming years will have a negative effect on GDP generally, in the same way that Brexit has already damaged UK trade, as people are removing jobs, removing functioning parts of their industry from the UK, simply because we're isolating ourselves, we're locking ourselves away. So of course we're not going to get any more stuff from other people who want to continually expand. Public finances, though, you're seeing a slight shift where you're saying, for the most part, yeah, it might lead to a lower demand on public services like the NHS because you won't have as many people. Fair enough. However, EU migration may have been overall more beneficial for public finances because there's more people to tax, there's more people working, higher employment rates relative to natives amongst these people, which means that they also would pay more tax. They were less likely to pay to claim out of work benefits than natives, because many people who are coming into this country would have to find themselves jobs, find themselves access to work to survive. And so either they've come in looking for a very specific job because that's their field, they've come in sponsored, or in the case of individuals who are coming in and maybe not being as well qualified or well connected, they've come in and they are doing jobs that many UK natives don't necessarily want to do, or they are working with family and so still earning money, still growing, still having to pay tax and deal with other things like that. And it's weaker public finances overall means more pressure on either tax rises and tax increases for everybody, or increased cuts, which we've already had so many of, and austerity just doesn't work. We don't need more of that. But if that's what we're going to run into, that's what we're going to run into. And then in regards to things like agriculture, construction, social care, the NHS, the abattoir industry, food production generally, we're going to be seeing a result of higher prices being charged by some of those sectors and disruptions in supply for others as a result of lower immigration, as that's where many of the either skilled or unskilled immigrants were working, or are working as it goes. You're going to see this huge shift in some of these areas, which isn't going to help anybody. Since when has locking ourselves away in a cupboard been a good idea if you want to make friends, earn money, do stuff? As someone that's having to chase clients and chase opportunities and things like that, as well as doing these videos for you guys to try and just help and touch in with as many people as I can, you've got this idea in this macro scale that hiding away as a country, becoming isolated and insular and losing friends, losing allies, putting ourselves at odds with people, that's somehow a good thing. And yet, when, if you look at it on a micro scale as an individual, as a company, no one would ever say you're going to be really successful by isolating yourself completely. So why does it work as a country? Simple, it doesn't. And then looking at it in terms of housing and wages and things like that, there's ultimately no evidence that the immigrants cause lower wages. There's absolutely no kind of no issue with pushing up housing costs either, because let's face it, if people in this country weren't reproducing, weren't dealing with these things, weren't an aging population that are just living longer anyway, then there wouldn't be a housing crisis. But guess what? We're still reproducing, we're an aging population, people aren't dying as quickly as they used to, and so they're holding on to their properties for longer. You've got people who are wealthier buying up more property to rent out, so you're not having people being able to get onto the property market, because those places that they maybe could have afforded or maybe could have at least tried to touch in on have already been bought up by other people for rent, and so that's why we're seeing a lot more renting. And there's this oft-cited study from the Bank of England that did show a negative impact on wages, but only for low-skilled workers. But it was even in the study itself, as well as also related by the author after the fact, that the impact was infinitesimally small. Why? Simple, because in law we've got things like the minimum wage that has to be upheld. We've got various other workers' rights that have to be upheld, and these are all written into law, which has to be upheld, and so as a result you're not going to see these huge disparities and huge breakdowns in terms of wages and what people can afford. There's no, they're taking our jobs. It's very, very straightforward, as those laws are enforced for everybody, and so as a result, if you're, for example, abattoir workers, the actual one of the industries that actually came out and said, we're big and we require these people to come in and work for us, because guess what? Your average school leaver, your average college leaver, they've got their ideas, they've got their things, they want to either go and be productive in a very specific field, or they don't have ambition and they just want to work in a shop just for money, just to crack on, or they are deluded to the extent that they want to go on X Factor and become amazing or something like that. And either way, none of them want to come in and kill cows, sheep, pigs and chickens for a living. Yeah, they all want to go off and do these other things, and they don't, food's just stuff that turns up in the supermarket and then you buy it, cook it and eat it, right? No, it has to come from somewhere, but that's not something that many young people, who are the ones who are struggling against this the most as well, are having to consider all that much. And so, yeah, guess what? These people are filling the gap. The abattoir industry was literally saying, if all of these people have to leave, or if we have this lower intake of them, whenever we have kind of turnover, people leaving, people going home to their own countries, people who are just not around anymore, then we're going to suffer, because we won't have the people to replace them, because our own native like UK citizens don't want to be doing this damn job. You're going to have all of that, and it's going to be ridiculous and painful, and I'm sure it's only going to get worse. And it's been said a couple of times by the guy who wrote, or one of the guys who was his name, John Kerr, I think, who was involved in the writing of the Lisbon Treaty and was party to the creation of Article 50 and things like that, and so on and so forth as well, where he's going, this makes no sense, this is ridiculous, this is only damaging us. And, yet somehow we're continuing down this path into madness and suicide as a country, just because our leaders are authoritarian nutjobs, and the people who put them there are irrational individuals who are focused on quite frankly their own feelings and their wanting to correct issues for their children when their children potentially perceive no issues. It's damaging, it's based on ignorance, it's based on arrogance, and quite frankly we've only just started to scratch the surface with this. It's only going to get worse. at the very least for the next couple of years. We're losing money, we're losing people, we're losing trade. Simply put, we need to take advantage of the fact that kind of capacity to revoke Article 50 is still sat there. We've now, you don't know what you have until it's gone. Well, guess what? We're seeing it slip away, and once it's gone, we're probably not going to be able to get it back. So now that we're seeing it go, we know what we're losing. Fucking take hold of it and don't let it slide away anymore. I have talked about this a fair amount over the last year, and it never gets easier, it never gets happier, and I'm sure that there are a huge number of people that are sick and tired of seeing this in videos, whether they agree, whether they disagree, whether they're indifferent, as half the population were either indifferent or unable to vote during the referendum. It kind of split the country anyway. What I'd really like to see would be a case of, okay, so now that we've seen what we're losing, now that we've seen all of this damage that's being done, let's have another referendum. Let's have a referendum on the Brexit bill, on the leaving, on all of this stuff that now has come to light, leaving the single market. Let's have another referendum on that and see what the results are this time. Because the number of people that I've talked to who voted leave, and now, almost with the exception of I think 2 people of maybe 50 that I've spoken to who have said that they chose to leave, and who have ended up now regretting their decision, of all of those people, only those 2 are still so arrogant and ignorant to focus on, oh, well, we just want to leave. Doesn't matter how we leave, it doesn't matter, we just need to leave because we don't like those other people. As irrational as that is, we need to, if you want it to be the will of the people, if you want this to be done properly, then it needs to be brought back to the people for approval. Considering that the non-legally binding referendum that was taken as law as soon as it was finished, just because it was to the political advantage of certain unscrupulous individuals who don't really have any regard for the common person, for the average individual living within this country. We're having to deal with simply the fallout of their ego and opportunism. So let's bring it back. Let's go for another referendum, go for round 2, and see if now everyone still agrees. Because quite frankly, I think the result will be somewhat different. Anyway, guys, I'd love to know what your thoughts are, even if it's like, Seb, please stop doing these month in review videos because they're all depressing. And maybe the odd story here and there, the odd thing that comes up, that'd be great. But otherwise, just stop. I would completely get behind those comments, to be honest. But either way, guys, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on both the ICBM North Korea stuff, as well as this continual spiraling chaos that is Brexit. And otherwise, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, then please drop us a like, share this video, and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care.